When it comes to leaky gut, most people are working with a short list of things that they've been told to try. But there's a meaningful difference between a list of interventions and a sequenced clinical approach. The 4 strategies that I'm covering in this video today are not random. They are ranked by the evidence, ordered by priority, and the last one is something most practitioners won't bring up until everything else has already been tried. I'm Dr. Kenny, root cause health detective and IFM-certified functional medicine practitioner. Let's get into it. Before we get into the 4 tiers, I want to give you something that most leaky gut content won't say clearly. Intestinal hyperpermeability, which is the clinical term for what we call leaky gut, is not a defined disease. There's no universally agreed upon gold standard test for it either. Zonulin gets talked about constantly as a leaky gut marker, but its reliability as a standalone diagnostic tool is genuinely debated in the research. Some commercial kits that are measuring it don't correlate well with actual functional measures of permeability. And here's the thing, even if we confirmed beyond a doubt that your barrier was compromised, that confirmation alone won't tell us what is driving it. The driver is the whole point. So the better question to ask never was, do I have leaky gut or not? It's, what is my gut barrier responding to and why? That reframe changes everything about how we approach conversations on leaky gut, and it's why the 4th tier in this framework matters more than most people expect. And here's something else worth naming before we go any further. If you have chronic conditions, whether they are in the gut or not, there is a likely chance that leaky gut is a part of that situation. Let's start with stark digestive symptoms, for instance. A systematic review published in 2024 found that between 37 and 62% of people with diarrhea-predominant IBS had measurable increases in intestinal permeability compared to healthy controls. That's definitely not a fringe finding. It's consistent, and it's a documented pattern that goes alongside digestive symptoms. If you've had a known microbial imbalance, like bacterial overgrowth, yeast overgrowth, or maybe even a hidden or low-grade infection, your barrier is almost certainly affected. The microbiome and the barrier are in constant communication with one another, and when one is disrupted, the other often follows. When we move beyond the gut, if you're living under chronic stress, and we covered this in detail in the last video, but your stress chemistry is physically opening your gut lining in real time. This is documented in human subjects, not just animal models. And if you have an autoimmune condition or live somewhere along the autoimmune spectrum, things like rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, lupus, or even inflammatory bowel disease, a 2021 review confirmed that increased intestinal permeability is part of that picture in the literature. In Crohn's disease specifically, barrier compromise has been shown to precede clinical relapse, meaning that the gut is signaling before symptoms actually escalate. And by the way, if you're one who likes the research, I've included a free research summary that links to the studies that I used in this particular case, as well as a brief summary of these studies. So check it out if that interests you. Leaky gut is not some rare diagnosis for a niche group of people. It's a common downstream and related expression of a system that's under a burden. If your body is carrying any of these patterns, this conversation is relevant to you. So what I'm about to walk you through is not a basic checklist. It's a sequenced framework with 4 main tiers, each addressing a different layer of what drives barrier compromise in the gut. And when it comes to leaky gut and treating, the goal is not to just layer on interventions. It's to investigate systematically first until you understand what your body is actually responding to, and then address that specifically. Each one of these builds on the last, and the reason many people stall along this process is that they skip to tier 3 without having tier 1 and tier 2 in place. So stay with me because the sequence here does matter. Tier 1 focuses on lifestyle and the nervous system. This is the foundation, and it's the one that gets the least airtime in leaky gut content generally because it's harder to sell than a supplement or a test. Your nervous system is the upstream regulator of your gut environment. When your sympathetic nervous system or your fight and flight nervous system is chronically activated, your gut is in a functional environment that prioritizes survival over repair. Digestive secretions reduced, your gut motility slows down, and even the immune strength and resilience at the gut surface shifts in a measurable way. The tight junctions that hold your barrier together come under chemical pressure from the elevated cortisol and stress signaling molecules that permeate the cells in your body. We covered the research on this in the last video as well, but acute psychological stress in healthy humans showed measurably increased leaky gut or intestinal permeability as well. So both a single stressor and chronically elevated stress can have this effect. What this means practically is that the tools that support stress are very important. In fact, pivotal here. Breath work, sleep consistency, intentional recovery time, and a regulated nervous system state are not just soft lifestyle suggestions. They are the chemical foundation of being able to shift into healing and repair. If your nervous system is chronically in this threat mode, which many of ours are today, no supplement is going to fully compensate for that upstream pressure that is consistently there. This tier has to be part of the approach, not just an afterthought or a nicety. Tier number 2 are your dietary inputs and information. Diet is where most leaky gut conversations start, and the evidence here is real, but it does need some context. A 2024 randomized controlled trial following people with Crohn's disease found that a whole food dietary approach, which included polyphenols, fiber, and resistant plant starch, while removing ultra-processed foods, produced a significant reduction in both zonulin and LPS binding protein, which are two validated markers for barrier function. That's meaningful and measurable, and it happened in 13 weeks. What made that intervention work was not any single superfood. It was the removal of barrier disruptors, the ultra-processed foods, alongside barrier supportive inputs at the same time. The disruptors are worth understanding as well, and we talked a bit about things like emulsifiers in the last video. They are consistently linked to increased permeability in the research. But broadly, high sugar load that feeds dysbiotic bacteria, and for some people, gluten and dairy, not universally, but in the context of an already compromised barrier, they can keep the immune response at the surface chronically activated. What matters here is the sequencing principle, ultimately. Remove what's driving the damage before adding what supports the repair and expecting some kind of results. And if you want to see the research behind the dietary intervention trial that I just referenced, that's in the pinned comment in the description below as well. The third tier is the targeted supplementation piece. This is the tier that many people are already in when they find this video. And the inputs in this category have some genuine evidence behind them, which is why we spent the first video in the series going through the mechanisms in detail. The short version here is that colostrum has some of the strongest clinical evidence for directly reducing intestinal permeability across multiple randomized control trials. Butyrate supportive prebiotics, followed by targeted probiotics, have meaningful evidence to support them as well, with the caveat that the strain and the dosing and your individual terrain matter more than almost anything else. We also talked about collagen-derived compounds from bone broth, for instance, that support the mucosal layer, as well as specific amino acids like glutamine that the research shows supports tight junction integrity, especially under inflammatory conditions. Here's the nuance, though, how you use this tier. These inputs work best when both Tier 1 and Tier 2 are already providing a stable environment, the signals, the safety signals I call them, that support any direct inputs from supplements that you're receiving. Taking colostrum even into a system that's still under chronic stress, or eating a diet full of barrier disruptors and sleeping irregularly is like building on unstable ground. The inputs can still provide some level of benefit, but their ceiling of improvement is significantly lower. And this is also where the elemental diet comes in for some people who haven't responded to anything else. An elemental diet means nutrition that is derived in its pre-digested form that requires minimal digestive processing to bypass any absorption errors that you might have in the moment. This gives the gut lining genuine rest periods, as well as ensures that you're absorbing the nutrients that you need for repair. The evidence base for this intervention is very strong in inflammatory bowel conditions, but the mechanism is pretty straightforward overall. When the gut doesn't have to work hard to process the food and to absorb it, the mucosal lining also gets a window of time to repair. This is not necessarily a first-line approach, though. It is an escalation option when the barrier isn't responding and the inflammatory load on the body remains pretty high. And I recommend guidance throughout the process as well. The fourth tier is what separates an investigation from a generic protocol, and it's the one that most content also never reaches. The premise is simple. If you've worked through tiers 1, 2, and 3 with genuine consistency, and you're still not seeing meaningful results and improvement in your gut or body-wide symptoms, the answer is almost never to add more interventions. It's to figure out what your barrier is still responding to that's never been identified yet. This is where targeted and good functional testing earns its place, not as a fishing expedition or throwing the kitchen sink at you. And it's not an excuse to run every panel available and drown you in data, but as a targeted investigation into the most likely upstream, truly root cause drivers that have not been addressed yet. The tests that I find most clinically useful in this context, and I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting you need all of these. It's about matching the test to the clinical picture. A comprehensive functional stool panel can go a long way. It looks at your microbiome diversity, shifts in the good or bad direction, the presence of pathogenic organisms like parasites, fungi, as well as markers of inflammation in the gut, and insight into your digestive power. This gives us a broad overview on the gut-related things that could be driving your leaky gut. Next is a true cortisol, rhythm, and other hormone assessment. Ideally, a multiple point salivary test that you take several times throughout the day to understand what your stress response is doing, not just in a single snapshot like a blood test captures, but rather looking at your rhythms throughout the day as well as the total cortisol moving through the system. The rhythm and the total cortisol is what matters the most when we talk about its effects on opening and closing those barriers in leaky gut. Secondary lines of testing include things like mitochondrial-focused testing or even micronutrient panels to better understand where the roadblocks might be occurring in either absorption or repair. This is often where hidden drivers show up that neither a stool test nor a basic blood panel or even stress chemistry test can reveal. The point is not to test everything, though. It's to ask the right questions based on your pattern, based on your lived experiences, and that's the difference between a functional medicine investigation and just guessing with expensive tools and protocols. Here's what I want to truly and deeply land in this leaky gut series. Leaky gut is a response. It's not a starting point. It doesn't exist in isolation. It is what your barrier does when it's under load from something upstream, whether chronic stress, hidden gut infections, or perhaps inflammatory loads from food. It can also be a driver that has not been identified yet. The 4 tiers in this framework, they're meant to be visited in an order so that each layer is actually in place before you escalate to the next. The lifestyle and nervous system piece create the environment for healing to occur. The dietary terrain removes the insults and adds in the support and the repair products needed. And then targeted supplementation adds specific barrier support when it's needed. Lastly, that functional investigation piece is what helps us to understand better specifically what your body is responding to when the other 3 haven't been enough. The question that actually changes outcomes isn't just what should I take for my leaky gut or fill in the blank. It's what is my gut barrier showing me and what does my system specifically need to stop responding and to start rebuilding. That's the investigation, and that's the exact kind of pattern that I help my own patients through. If you're in one of the states that I practice, feel free to request and apply for a health mystery map call if you'd like some help with my eyes on your case. If any of what we covered in this series resonated with you, there's a next natural layer to explore. Gut health does not exist in isolation from the rest of your system. So if fatigue or brain fog or energy issues are part of your picture alongside the gut symptoms, those patterns are often connected at the root level. And I break that down exactly in this video here, why you feel tired all the time despite your healthy habits. So check it out. I'm Dr. Kenny, Root Cause Health Detective. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.